As soon as we provided access to the SQL Server itself, by creating SQL Server accounts or by granting access to operating system users or groups, I still need to provide the user access to the actual database. What I need to do there is I need to assign the login accounts to database users, and that's how the user actually gets permissions into the database. So as soon as we have the logins for the SQL accounts we created earlier, then we still need to map these login accounts to database users. It's the database user where we will specify what the actual permissions for the user will be in a database and whether or not he gets the permission to read all objects or to perform insert operations, for example. What we can do is we can use SQL Server Enterprise Manager or we have the possibility to use Query Analyzer with the stored procedure sp_grant db access. As mentioned earlier, SQL Server has two specific user accounts existing in every database. That'll be the DBO user account, or I have the possibility to create a guest account. Let me show you how permissions work within SQL Server. The DBO account should be the owner of all objects. It's the database owner. What happens when a user gets access to SQL Server? He needs to be able to be mapped to your user account. I do have the possibility to create additional user accounts within the database and then map the user to or a user, or I can map him to a database role. These users or roles will be used to assign permissions. Database roles and users could be assigned permissions in a database, and I'll be able to specify whether a user should get access to certain objects. There's different types of permissions I could use. I could give a user or a role the grant permission. I could deny the permission, and I also have the ability to revoke permissions. Let's see what happens when we grant the user access to a database. Within SQL Server, I used my SysX logins table in order to specify the logins. This could be a Windows login, or it could be a SQL Server login we created earlier. Within every database, I do have a sys users table, and I also have a sys protects table that will keep track of the actual permissions. Now what I need to do is the login. I need to provide the login with access to the database, and I can do this by mapping the SQL login to an actual database user. When using sp_grant db access, I'll specify the login I used earlier, and I will map this login to a user account I want to create and use within that specific database. So basically, I just name the user within this database. And I could specify that the orchestra user less will be mapped as db admin. So in my sys users table, there will be an entry created that says I do have a db admin user. I do have the ability to assign permissions onto this user by assigning the user permissions to database roles, or I can assign permissions directly onto objects by using grant, deny, or revoke permissions. When I use database roles, we'll see that the database roles will be assigned and created within the sysUsers table as well. When I map the login account to the user in the database, I do have the possibility to assign permissions. Permissions could be set by giving the user access to a database role or assign it to a database role. I also have the possibility to directly give the user access by using grant, revoke, or deny permissions.